We're back with part 3 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, Tree of Life version. And this week we're in 1 Samuel, chapters 11 through 20. And we just completed chapter 15. So chapter 15 was kind of the last straw for Saul, where God was concerned. And as we move forward, we're going to see exactly what that means. So in chapter 15, we see Saul's disobedience, and he is rejected as king. Samuel said to Saul that the Lord sent him to anoint him to be king over the people, over Israel, and he was to hearken to the voice of the words of the Lord. He told him to go and smite Amalek. However, he didn't listen. He did. They did smite Amalek, but he spared Agag, the king, and they took spoil. He was more concerned with the fact that the people wanted the spoil, more concerned with also what the elders would think of him if Saul didn't come with him to bow down to God. But he really wasn't worshiping God from his heart because he was more concerned with himself. So, and God knew that, and God knew that pride had taken over Saul. So at this point, the Lord the Lord was pretty much done with him as being the king. And actually, Saul realized that he sinned and transgressed, but Samuel basically told him, this is pretty much it. And the Lord is not going to change his mind. The Lord does not lie, and he is not a man that he should repent or change his mind. It's, Saul sinned, and this is the end of it, and that the Lord had regretted ever making Saul king over Israel. And that was a statement that is in the Bible, and how the Lord felt. And actually, we're going to move forward, and we're going to see actually the Lord actually did depart from the Spirit of the Lord did depart from Saul, because of his disobedience, because of his pride, and he just wasn't following directions the way that he should have. So, sometimes when we're given titles, we need to be careful that it doesn't go to our heads. Um, we are still, God is still in control no matter what. And actually, Saul had lost it here. He definitely had. Okay, we're going to continue with chapter 16. Samuel anoints David. Now Adonai said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have selected for myself a king among his sons." But Samuel replied, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." Adonai said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to Adonai.' Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will let you know what you are to do. You will anoint for me whom I tell you." So Samuel did what Adonai said and went to Bethlehem. The elders of the town came out to meet him trembling and asked, "Do you come in shalom?" "In shalom," he said. "I have come to sacrifice to Adonai. Consecrate yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." He also consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. Upon their arrival, he saw Eliab and thought, "Surely Adonai's anointed one is before him." But Adonai said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or his stature, because I have already refused him. For he does not see a man as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but Adonai looks into the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. But he said, "Neither has Adonai chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and again he said, "Neither has Adonai chosen this one? Thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to Jesse, Adonai has not chosen any of these. Then Samuel asked Jesse, are these all the boys you had? They're still the youngest, he replied, but right now he's tending the sheep. Send and bring him, Samuel said to Jesse, for we will not sit down until he comes here. So he sent word and had him come. Now he was ruddy-cheeked with beautiful eyes and a handsome appearance. Then Adonai said, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. So Samuel took a horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. From that day on, Ruach Adonai came mightily upon David. Then Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. So David was the youngest son of Jesse, and he was the one chosen. David soothed Saul's torment. Now the Ruach Adonai had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from Adonai terrified him. So Saul's courtiers said to him, behold, now an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord now command your courtiers in your service to search for a man who is a skillful player on the harp. Then whenever the evil spirit from God comes on you, he will play with his instrument and you will feel better. So Saul said to his courtiers, find me someone who can play well, and bring him to me. One of the young men answered and said, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing music. He is a mighty man of valor, a warrior, prudent in speech, a handsome man, and Adonai is with him. So Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, send me your son David, who is with the flock. So Jesse took a donkey, loaded it with bread and a bottle of wine, and a young goat, and sent them with his son David to Saul. Then David came to Saul and became one of his attendants. Saul loved him greatly, so David became his armor-bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, let David now keep attending me, for he has found favor in my eyes. It came to pass, whenever the Spirit from God came upon Saul, David would take the harp and play it with his hand, so Saul would find relief and feel better as the evil spirit departed from him. So that's the end of chapter 16. So David slays Goliath with sling and stone is chapter 17. Now the Philistines assembled their armies to battle. They were gathered at Sokoh of Judah and camped in Ephes Damim between Sokoh and Ezekah. Saul and the men of Israel gathered and camped in the valley of Elah, then lined up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines were standing on the mountain on one side, and Israel was standing on the mountain on the other side with the valley between them. Then a champion stepped out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, and he had a bronze helmet on his head and a breastplate, scale of armor, the weight of the breastplate, the bronze that's a tongue twister there, of the bronze breastplate was 5,000 shekels. He also had bronze shin guards on his legs and a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders, and the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer was marching ahead of him. Then he stood and shouted out to the ranks of Israel, saying to them, why come out to line up in battle array? Am I not the Philistine, and aren't you Saul's servants? Choose for yourselves a man, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will become your slaves. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then will you become our slaves and serve us? The Philistine added, today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man so we may fight together. But when Saul and Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and very terrified. Now David was son of a certain Ephrathite man of Bethlehem of Judah. So David is from the tribe of Judah, from Bethlehem, the youngest son of Jesse, whose whose name was Jesse. He had 8 sons, and during the days of Saul the man was old, advanced in years among men. Now the 3 oldest sons of Jesse had already left and gone after Saul to the battle. The names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, and second to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, so the 3 oldest followed Saul. Now David would go back and forth from Saul to tending his father's sheep by Bethlehem. For 40 days that Philistine would come out every morning and evening to present himself. Then Jesse said to his son David, "Take now for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers also. Take these 10 slices of cheese to the captain of their 1,000, and check out the welfare of your brothers, and bring back some token from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines." So David rose up early in the morning, left the flock with a keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse had commanded him. When he reached the camp, the army was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up their battle lines, army against army. Then David left his baggage in the care of the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line and entered to check out his brother's welfare. But as he was talking with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine from Gath, named Goliath, was coming up from the ranks of the Philistines, and he spoke these same words, and David heard them. Upon seeing him, all the men of Israel fled from him in great fear. All the men of Israel were saying, "Have you seen this man who keeps coming up? Surely he is coming up to defy Israel. The man who kills him, the king will enrich him with great riches, give him his daughter in marriage, and make his father's house tax-free in Israel." Then David asked the men who were standing by him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the ranks of the living God?" The people answered him with the same speech. "Thus it will be done for the man who strikes him down." Now when Eliab his oldest brother heard him speaking to the men, Eliab's anger was kindled against David. "Why have you come down here?" he asked. "So with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you've come down here to watch the battle." "What have I done?" David said. "It was only a question." Then he turned away from him. Then he turned him Then he turned away from him towards someone else and asked the same question, so the people gave him the same answer as before. The words that David said were overheard and reported before Saul, so he was taken to him. David said to Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And then Saul said to David, "You can't go fight this Philistine, for you're just a youth, and you've been a warrior, and he's been a warrior since his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been tending his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it, struck it down, and rescued the lamb out of its mouth. If it rose up against me, I grabbed him by its fur, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, so this uncircumcised Philistine will become like one of them, since he has defied the ranks of the living God." Then David said, "Adonai, who has delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." "Go," said Saul to David, "and may Adonai be with you." Then Saul clothed David with his own garb, put a bronze helmet on his head, and clothed him in armor. David strapped his sword on his garment and tried to walk, but he was not used to it. So David said to Saul, "I cannot walk in these, for I am not used to them." He also had not proved them, is another line that in the KJV. So David took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the valley, put them in the pocket of the shepherd's bag that he had, and with his sling in his hand he approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine drew nearer and approached David with his shield bearer in front of him. Now when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained, for he was just a ruddy boy with a handsome appearance. Then the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" Then the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, so I may give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You are coming to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I am coming to you in the name of Adonai Sabaoth, God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day Adonai will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and take your head off, and I will give the carcass of the Philistines camp today to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth. Then all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel, and so all this assembly will know that Adonai delivers not with the sword and spear, for the battle belongs to Adonai, and he will give you into our hands." Then, when the Philistine rose and began to advance, drawing near to David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took from it a stone, and slung it, striking the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead so that he fell on his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, struck the Philistine down, and killed him. Since there was no sword in David's hand, David ran and stood over the Philistine, picked up his sword, drew it from its sheath, slew him, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Then the men of Israel and Judah rose up and shouted and pursued the Philistines all the way to the valley, up to the gates of Ekron. The slain Philistines fell down along the way to Sha'arim, Shaaraim, even up to Gath and Ekron. When Bani Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his own tent. Now, when Saul saw David going out against the Philistine, he asked Abner, the commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is this boy?" Abner said, "As your soul lives, your majesty, I don't know." So the king said, "Then find out whose son this young man is." So when David returned from killing the Philistines, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul said to him. David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." So that's the end of chapter 17. I'm going to recap um, all of this at the very end. I'm going to just actually, maybe I better recap this now. I'm going to recap chapter 16 and 17. Well, in chapter 16, the Lord said to Samuel, "How long are you going to mourn for Saul, seeing that I have rejected him from reigning over Israel?" And he told him to fill his horn with oil and go, and um, he send him to Jesse, and all of Jesse's sons were brought before him, except for the youngest one who was out in the field, um, actually tending to his father's sheep. And the first seven, the Lord said, "No, this is not the one." And when David was brought before Samuel, Adonai said, "This is the one." And so he anointed David. Um, so the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. And the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit came from the Lord to trouble him. And interestingly enough, David is the one that was called to actually um, soothe him with his music, with playing the harp, and then Saul would feel better. So he really did come to like David at that point, but that doesn't last for very long, as we're going to see. Spoiler alert. Um, but he's still in Saul's good favors in chapter 17 when he slays the giant, which is Goliath from Gath. And this was a big giant. And he was a warrior from youth, and David never was in battle. And he was just very angry that he was making a mockery out of the army of God. So he said he would go up against him, and actually he trusted God that much, and he leaned into God, and God gave him the victory. And I will talk a little bit more about this a little bit later as I give a few extra little nuggets as well. Um, the armor that Saul had given to David, he wasn't familiar with, and he said he had not proved it because when he had done, he had taken care of the lion and the bear. Actually, God was with him. He communed with God all the time when he was tending to his father's sheep, and he had a very close relationship with God, and he was definitely a man after God's heart. And that's why he was chosen um, to um, to be king, and he was anointed of God. So, like I said, I am going to touch on this a little bit more and give you a few extra nuggets, but I'm going to pause it and come back with the next part.